there are 8 chapters, because of which you say that we are 8-class citizens.
Yes.
I want to briefly go through all of them because I have a lot of questions. I don't know if we'll be able to get through all of them, but I really want to ask you. So, in the first chapter on temple control, you've written about how the Congress government brought back the law after it was struck down, the Endowment Act, after it was struck down by the High Court. And then when it was brought back, the High Court actually said that how does it infringe a Hindu's right to worship?
Yes.
You can still worship
Yes.
as much as you can, even if the temple is under government control.
Okay.
But you did stop short of explaining how exactly does government control of Hindu temples actually infringe on the right to pray of Hindus.
Right.
So why do you think it infringes on the right to pray? It might infringe on the right to run your own institutions, etc. But why right to pray?
So, that's a very interesting question. If I can frame it a little bit differently, what does one actually mean when one says Hindu is praying? That itself is a very philosophical question. In the South, when we go to a temple, what do we do? When we see people entering Sri Padmanabha Swami temple or, in Madurai, so many temples, do they just go and stare and wait for the doors of the Sanctum Sanctorum to open? In the South, you would realize, Nupur, that praying is just part of the visit to the temple, maybe a fraction of it. Overwhelmingly, it is to soak in the experience, serenity, spirituality, you may call it, to indulge yourself, to succumb to if you believe in the powers that are, to sit there, to deliberate, to discuss. It was part of your life. So praying, aspects of Hinduism are you can sit where you are. I can be talking to you right now and praying, if I'm a believer, praying right now. So I don't need a temple. Kan mein Bhagwan hai, wo keh ke aap. You don't need an idol. You don't need to express. But they exist. And people pray when they visit the temple. So when I say that Hindus need the temples and the governments stop it, if part of praying is also the ability of the temple to conduct a puja, then I quote the Madras High Court and Tamil Nadu government saying that we have 11,999 temples under our control and we are not able to conduct even one puja a day. Isn't that obstructing the whole idea of praying or the process of praying? So bit by bit, you are attacking, you're chiseling down the aspects that were a composite and prayer being just part of it. I can include temple idols being stolen. When you talk of praying, people pray in front of an idol. If that idol has been stolen because of laxity or, government interference, then obviously it's an interference in praying. So praying is a very loose word as far as Hinduism is concerned. That is what my aspect. Yeah.
So you're saying essentially that the temple premises itself is sacred to Hindus,
Yes.
and therefore, if it's controlled by the government and not by the Sampradaya itself and the Hindus themselves,
Correct.
It's an infringement upon their rights.
Yes.
Now, you did speak about how there are Christians and Muslims who are managing temple boards in various places, in Tamil Nadu, in West Bengal, for example. But you also then said, concluding your chapter, that for you the way forward would be if a temple becomes like a publicly held institution.
Yes.
Now, my issue with that was, the first thought that struck me was that my Kuladevi, for example, is Sati Mata, and our temple is in Junjunu in Rajasthan.
Correct.
Now, if I want to buy shares of, say, Sabrimala, how is it different from a Christian or a Muslim interfering in that temple? Because I am not a believer in Lord Ayyappa. Since Hinduism is so diverse, every individual has a separate deity, has a separate goddess that they would pray to. And therefore, I should, as an individual, have a say only in the management of the temple in Junjunu, because that is my Kuladevi, instead of having a say in any other temple, which follows a different ritual and prays to a different deity. So do you see some sort of similarity in the solution you suggested and non-believers being in the temple management board?
So, for example, I'm a non-believer, but I would want the temple, not only the temple to prosper, but the whole temple way of life to prosper. So, and by the way, that was you being very polite. Thank you. Some people took genuine umbrage, but they weren't abusive. They just found it little bit off-putting that you are reducing or you're giving a solution that reduces a temple to a company. Let's put it that way. I agree with that. Their objection to that, but suffice it to say, it's just a solution from my end, and it's I think in my haste to bring out a solution, because the government certainly isn't going to solve this issue, I maybe became too practical. You can lend it to the way I think, very scientifically, non-emotionally. But the intention behind that was that this temple way of life should prosper. And it has always been my belief that the only key to prosperity is through capitalism, right? If you earnestly believe that temple is a way of life, then it's an organization. And for it to prosper, you have to partake in capitalist means. And how do you do it? You list it. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Now, the couple of questions that you asked. So, as a non-believer, if I would want, for example, Tirupati to prosper, and if Tirupati prospers, even though I don't believe in the Hindu god there or anywhere else, once Tirupati prospers, Tirupati is a wrong example because Tirupati is already prospering. But I mean, any example.
Let's talk about some small temple
right.
for a Kuladevi or a
So my Kuladevi of my ancestors in Palakkad.
Yeah.
Right? Now that's a very small temple. If that temple is listed on the stock exchange, let's say, and everyone whose Kuldevi it is starts to invest, quote unquote, invest in that Kuldevi, the temple becomes prosperous. The temple will be able to run at least half a dozen or dozen organizations that would help the temple way of life prosper. And by that, I mean Ved Pathshalas, and I mentioned 3 or 4 there, just so many. There is an endless list of things that can be done. Nupur, if that's not a solution, I agree. That is my solution. It may be wrong. What is the other solution that people have brought? I haven't heard of any other than the fact that government should come out of this. Now, there is a legitimate concern of a lot of people that if not the government, then who? I mean, you are going to encourage corruption. Who is going to take over the temple if not the government? At least the government is doing some. Now, that is an excuse that everyone comes up with when you talk of PSUs, when you talk of profit-making PSU, when you talk of loss-making. कि भाई government है वहाँ पे तो चलो गंदा काम हो रहा है, लेकिन हो तो रहा है. आप प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स को दे दोगे, करप्शन बढ़ जाएगा, किसको दोगे, disputes होंगे, this, that. That happens with every private organization. Now, is it the government's role to say, look, I'm going to protect, and stop your slide into this? That's absurd. That means you want government intervention everywhere. You can't have it. Tomorrow there'll be a dispute in airlines or, some private this thing. For example, if there was a dispute between Mukesh and Anil Ambani, did you want the government to get into it? So that's absurd. This was just a solution. I'm not saying this is the only, but this was I thought it's a practical solution for temple, at least money to start coming to temple. Then the temple can decide whatever you want to, but I think those things will come. The problem is if the temples become very rich now, then by virtue of the government control, the government will start getting more and more money out of the temple. So this solution is applicable only when the government comes out of it. That's a catch-22.
I find it funny when, one of the criticisms is, as you mentioned, that there'll be more corruption and if it's maybe safer with the government.
Right.
I don't think there's a more corrupt institution than the government.
Yes.
And to assume that the devotees would fleece their own Devi Devta far more than a heartless and soulless government is a criticism that doesn't make sense to me.
Plus, I'm sorry, I'm being so hard in terms of practicability. But you look at any private organization, why it prospers and why it crumbles without government intervention. At every point of this stage of prospering or crumbling, there are decisions that people make in that organization that result in the ultimate outcome. You look at Nokia. At one point of time, who could have thought that Nokia would be nothing and Apple would be, something absolutely the buzzword, or any other organization making phones? My first phone was a Nokia phone that lasted, God knows how, built like a brick. And at that point of time, we thought, this is it. Nokia will be the world's biggest company going forward next 20 years. In the next 2 years, people forgot about it. Now, that's the way of the world, to borrow a Napoleon phrase. It is through competition. And if the temple management is corrupt, that the people realize it, the temple stops getting investment and money, then ultimately somebody associated with that temple will realize, will throw out the corrupt management, will bring in new blood, because ultimately, you have entered this Darwinian competition process that is always better than the government holding it. That is the simple thing.
So I come from a business class family, from a Banya family. And we have this tradition that 1% or whatever percentage you decide of your everyday business, when you sit down and do your accounting, whatever you want that day, a percentage is written in your accounting sheet. And then that money goes to the temple.
Wonderful.
Or the Goshala that the temple is running. And this is a practice with most Banya families, most business families who are Marwaris. This is a practice. And, you have conceded to that, and you're saying that right now also. But honestly, I think if it's left up to the devotees and the sampradaya that believes in that deity, then the temple is bound to be taken care of. So do you think the control should go back to the original sampradaya that is supposed to be taking care of the temple? Or should there be public participation? Because that is another debate that has been raging on quite a bit.
So my heart, if at all a scientist has a heart, possibly does, because I'm married, says that yes, the sampradaya or the original people who were, people who started the temple were the family, the priests. But my mind says public, because there's nothing like a public control, public listed. What it means is that the inadequacies are addressed much faster, because it affects the people who are affected. Those issues have to be resolved much faster. Very simple, right now, to be very honest with you, of course I care if Reliance crumbles tomorrow. Like I was worried when Adani was crumbling. $100 billion worth of investor wealth, our wealth, India's wealth crumbled to dust because of stupidity of Adani. Absolutely, and I've said it publicly, short of calling him IOT, because what kind of a corporate czar, rebuts allegations after a week, that too very thinly, silly videos and all, should have done it within an hour. But that's, other than that, if Reliance crumbles, I would be hurt, but if I have invested, let's say, 2 lakh or 5 lakh rupees in Reliance, it would hurt me immediately, wouldn't it? So likewise, if the investment or the decisions that are to be made for a specific temple are left to the people who are invested in it, I would say the misuse, the discrepancy, the corruption would be addressed that much faster. That's all. So it can go to Sampradaya, there would be fights over it and all that stuff. Or if it is publicly listed, then the decisions would be much faster. That's all I'm trying to say. But let me give you one example. When people talk about government control, and this is a very hurtful example, it's hurt even a non-believer, Darwinian atheist. Recently, there was this Eradicate Sanatan Dharma conference, right? The guy who is in charge in Tamil Nadu, the minister.
HRNC.
Yes, that fellow was there. Explain this to me. all those people who believe that temples should be under government control, explain this. Let me look directly into the camera. All those, including those who were pre-2014, wanted the temples to be, the government to relinquish control. But after 2014, and I know many of you who said, no, it's all right. Modi ji is controlling, everything is fine. The minister who's in charge of this went to an Eradicate Sanatan Dharma conference. What can be more insulting? What can be more diabolically ironical? These are the things that are going out right now. How are we accepting this? That fellow should have, the chief minister should have said resigned immediately.
It was the chief minister's son who wants it eradicated. So I'm sure he's happy that the man who wants to eradicate Sanatan Dharma is in charge of temples.
And, you can, there was some semantics there because immediately they were surprised by the backlash, even though people who are in the know, especially South Indians who know about the legacy of Periyar and, all those things, they've said 100 times worse things. But at least Stalin Jr. said he made a distinction between Hinduism and Sanatan Dharma just, to mollycoddle the people who were aggrieved. But later on, when A. Raja took over the reins, immediately about the whole narrative, he didn't even make that distinction. He straight away said, Hinduism is a menace. He didn't say Sanatan Dharma is a menace. So for them, there is no distinction. They actually want to eradicate Hinduism. How are you accepting them controlling Hindu temples? Answer me, all those proponents of government control of Hindu temples. The debate ends immediately.
Yeah. So my last question on temple control, because we have 7 more subheadings, is it's been 9 years since the Modi government has been in power. And every chapter you have hammered this over and over again, rightfully so, that we have a government in power right now that is believed to be pro-Hindu. And yet, we have seen no positive steps taken by this government towards freeing Hindu temples. Yes, there were certain decisions taken in Madhya Pradesh, for example, and there was certain conversation around freeing Hindu temples in various states ruled by BJP. But at the central level and at a policy level, at a legislative level, there's been no decision. Why do you think there is?
That's a very long answer to a very perceptive question that everyone's asked. I think the direct answer, and incidentally, the Madhya Pradesh one, nothing was in writing.
Yeah.
There's a couple of speeches of Shivraj Singh Chauhan. I think he just said it to the audience, भावनाओं में बह गए थे, इसलिए कह दिया उन्होंने. I think to answer this, let me not be cynical, because a cynical answer is BJP is as good or as bad as the Congress. That's a cynical answer. It has a ring of truth to it. But a serious answer to that is that BJP is not anti-Hindu like the Congress is. Ample evidence of that. There are some acts we'll go through that Congress is blatantly anti-Hindu. You have even non-BJP, non-Congress governments wanting to eradicate Hinduism. What can be more anti-Hindu than that? The BJP somehow right now is not pro-Hindu. So the difference between Congress and the BJP is that the BJP will not, in the short term, hurt Hindus the way Congress does. But in the long term, the hurt to the Hindus would be the same as Congress. And I've explained it just to take one example of Hindu temples. When you're preventing or not allowing or Hindu temples are unable to start hundreds of thousands of their schools, essentially in the long term, you are stopping the propagation of Hinduism, Hindu way of life, because that is what religious schools do. And if Christians are allowed to do that, Muslims are allowed to do it, you're stopping only the Hindus. So in the long term, you're hurting Hindus, right? So while the BJP is different from Congress in that respect, it's in the long term, they are equally hurting the Hindus for that. So
theirs is a crime of omission, theirs was a crime of commission.
Correct.